So it occurred to me throughout my experience as an advisor that it's more than just transitioning assets. There's a breakdown in communication trust when we talk about money, and there are a lot of transition points in life that get affected. So I wanted to, provide a roadmap, a set of guidelines that people could follow so that they could successfully achieve what they wanted to, and also, maintain the family harmony and the money. So, failure rate is associated with loss of money. So we want to make sure people keep their family members and their family units intact as well as their money.
Welcome back to the Bombshell Business Podcast. I'm your host, Amber Hurdle, and today we are going to talk about something that is a part of all of our lives. No one can hide from it. No one can hide from their experience of it. And that, my friends, is that dirty M word, money, if you believe it's a dirty word. I do not, nor does our guest think that that's a dirty word. In fact, she has delivered a beautiful book that is going to teach us all about that M word and money talk. So let me tell you about our guest today. Lori R. Sackler is a financial advisor, senior vice president, and family wealth director at a major financial institution where she leads a wealth management group. Her team is dedicated to helping individuals and families keep up with change, satisfying their financial security, addressing lifestyle and legacy concerns, and successfully guiding them through life's transitions. Sackler is a certified investment management analyst, a certified financial planner, and non-practicing certified public accountant. She could do a few things. She is the author of The M Word, The Money Talk Every Family Needs to Have About Wealth and Their Financial Future, published in 2013 by McGraw-Hill. Super impressive. And the M Word Journal, How to Have the Money Talk, released in 2016. She's the creator and former host of the radio show The M Word on WOR in New York City. Welcome to the show, Lori. That is quite the impressive CV you have there.
Well, thank you. And you did a great job of delivering it. I appreciate it. And I just want to add, this is my second edition of my first book that I released in 2013, and I basically upgraded it for the shifting in generations that's taking place and in response to COVID and the need, which is greater than ever, to really have productive conversations around money.
Oh, I agree with that. And I saw that it was the second edition when I got it in the mail. And that was actually one of my questions is, why did you, it's a heavy lift to publish a book. And then you're like, let's go again. And so our society has changed so much. Is there anything in particular other than COVID that you saw was like a pivotal part of this update?
Yes, because not only have things gotten dramatically more difficult for people, I think from a psychological point of view, many people are trying to figure things out professionally. We have new generations that now millennials represent the largest segment of the working population in this country. We have Gen Zs right behind them. So there's a lot of things that have shifted in the last 10 years. And there's an organization out of Boston that uses my book for continuing education credit for financial advisors. And they reached out to me and said, we're getting requests to have a more updated version. And so I thought, it's really an important time to sort of put it out there because, yes, it is a different time. Things have shifted a lot in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I agree with that so wholeheartedly. I watched, as a coach, I watched it in real time throughout the shutdown and people having stay-at-home orders and, really coaching hundreds of women and men, frankly, and then watching the psychological, the safety factor coming into play, the relational dynamics coming into play, like so much change that I can only imagine that this issue in particular, especially with the economic breakdowns and lack of trust and things that we used to trust in, has really made an impact. But before we even go to the second edition, why did you write the book to begin with? Like, what spurred that? Like, I'm going to get with a major publisher and put this into the world.
So I was seeing individuals within my circle of friends and family members, and then professionally, I was seeing people really struggling to have productive conversations. and not having successful outcomes when they were even trying to attempt them. And so I started to do my research. I wanted to figure out, why is this topic so hard? And part of my research was to find that there are a lot of reasons for it, but there tends to be a 70% there's a failure rate in transferring assets across generations. And breakdown in communication and trust is the primary reason. So it occurred to me throughout my experience as an advisor that it's more than just transitioning assets. There's a breakdown in communication and trust when we talk about money, and there are a lot of transition points in life that get affected. So I wanted to, provide a roadmap, a set of guidelines that people could follow so that they could successfully achieve what they wanted to, and also, maintain the family harmony and the money. So, failure rate is associated with loss of money. So we want to make sure people keep their family members and their family units intact as well as their money.
I love it. And there's a lot of money talk during times of transition, which are already stressful. Change is hard for most people. And that can look like, changing jobs or going from a very secure, or in theory, secure corporate job to then becoming an entrepreneur, or it could be a divorce, or it could be blended families. Now we're merging finances, and there's two different families with two different sets of expectations that are coming together. I mean, there's so retirement, all of those things. So how do you go about just even setting the stage to have these conversations during already stressful times?
Well, yes. And you mentioned a lot of the transition points that I address in my book. But, I tell people having these conversations is like going for a major interview for the life changing job of your career, or, making a presentation to your major, client. It's a really, in order to have success with this, you have to have a thoughtful and repeatable process. And that's partly the reason I wrote the books and the series of books, is to give people ample opportunity to look at what the steps are, to think them through, and try to figure out the best approach for their families. Because each family unit is different. Members in the family are different. There's a lot of different personalities you have to address. And I try to help people understand it's better to do this when it's not during that stressful moment.
Yeah.
It's better not to wait till mom gets sick, or I just gave my girlfriend an engagement ring. I mean, at the end of the day, I try to help people understand you want to pick non-stressful moments, and you want to, so you have a better opportunity for success. You certainly don't want to do it during the Christmas holidays or Thanksgiving vacation, or, a major life event in the family. So, yeah, I think your point is well taken. You want to think it. You certainly don't want to do it during a stressful moment. And when you've hit with the stressful moment or event, or something that's happened in the family to create a lot of stress, you're not, all of the stress of the event is going to interfere with you being able to thoughtfully consider all the consequences of the decisions and think through all the individuals who need to be engaged in these conversations to make them successful.
Yeah, it's interesting. If I could just share a little anecdote. When I went through my divorce, I wasn't anticipating it. So I didn't have any type of plan because I didn't see it coming. So I knew from previous grieving experiences that you really need a year. You need a year to like make any major change, living in this new normal and going through the different seasons and understanding what does that mean for my life. So instead of building a house, and this was, at the peak of the housing boom, and lumber was bedazzled and everything was expensive and labor was short and everything was hard. And so I actually had a piece of property, and it had a 3-bedroom double wide manufactured home on it. And I thought, I could go live in an apartment and flush that money down the toilet, and then wait and pay way more money for a house that I will not see a return on for years to come. Or I can pimp my trailer, and I can make that be something super livable on land that I already own it. I already own the land, and I can sit there for a year while I figure out what is best for me next. Because I know not to make financial decisions during extremely stressful times. And it was honestly one of the best choices I could have made for my life. It was crazy. People thought I'd lost my mind. I went from a house that was literally on the cover of magazines and newspapers to living in a double wide. Smartest, most peaceful choice of my past 2 years, truly. Just sharing
Well,
that.
that's a well, that's a great example. I mean, you obviously engaged your thinking part of your brain, the higher level of your brain. Many of us will engage in the lower end of the brain, and when emotional trauma hits us. So, congratulations, kudos to you. And I think when it comes to any transition in life, you want to step back, you want to think it through what's going on, and when it comes to having money conversations, you want to think through, what are the choices? What's the transition I'm dealing with? What are the issues I need to address? How do I best approach it? What are the factors that I need to think through that are interfering with me having these conversations with the people who I need to talk to about? And then you obviously need to put together some kind of a game plan so you have success with whatever transition that you're dealing with.
Yeah. So I know that, the book lays out a step process to engage in these conversations. Did you just hit on some of those, or can we like slow
Well,
down and like take it step by step?
yeah. So let me add a little more context.
Sure.
So, first step would be identify the transition you're facing. So, your example of going through a divorce is a very typical one, right? That's a huge transition. And that'll help define what are the issues, what are the topics I need to talk about and think through in order to make smart decisions, right? The second one is I call prepare the inner landscape. Whether you need to talk to an individual who you're ending a relationship with, or you may have a family member who's dealing with some serious health issues. Whatever it is, you want to think through what are the factors that are interfering with my having those conversations about these issues and topics. And it could be family history, it could be trust and control issues that are in the family, or within these, with these other individuals. So you want to think through what are those factors that are preventing me from having these productive conversations, and identify those that are most important to your conversation. And then the third I call prepare the outer landscape. You brought up the topic of not having these conversations during stressful moments, right? So I say to people, things I would like you to think through the what, who, when, where, why, and how. What's the topic? Who are the people we need to talk to? When is the best time? Not during stressful moments. Where is the best location, right? A location that's supportive and nurturing, and it will help with the conversations. Why is it so important for you to have these conversations? Is it because you need to talk about separation of assets, or you need to talk about how to find mom a nursing home? I mean, whatever it is, there's a real important transition point here, and you don't want to, you want to be successful and keep family relationships intact as well as the family money. And then I talk about the how. How do you go about the conversation, and how do you deal with, with conflict that's going to arise, right? Because it will. I mean, people break down the conversation. They go into their inner child, right? So you want to think through all that. And of course, the fourth step is what I call ask for help. I think the most productive conversations are when you have a third party. Call it a mediator. Call it somebody who's independent, who has some skills and knowledge of the situation, and can keep the topic and the conversation on course, and help get people to the ultimate successful outcome. And then the fifth step is to repeat as necessary. So you're going to create a disciplined, thoughtful process. You're going to have to repeat it, because it's not going to happen. You're not going to get to your end result in a single moment, 1 hour or so. So I think, if you're disciplined and thoughtful and you repeat a process that's workable, you should have a higher degree of success. And when I'm talking about, bringing in a third party, I think that's really a very important piece to the puzzle. In fact, I see it play out in my office. Family members will break down. They'll be accusatory. They'll bring up all the old garbage, if it's a sensitive topic. So having that third party who can keep people, keep the conversations on track, and have that respect and trust within the unit that you're discussing the topics with to have a better outcome.
So good. You used the term, and you touched on it a little bit, but can we go a little bit deeper into the preparing the inner landscape side of things?
Mm.
What does that
Yeah.
really mean, and how do we make that happen?
Well, I talk about factors that are just above the surface, right? So let's think about it. what are the issues that are mostly associated with money? I mean, you probably know that, Amber. Let's talk about control. Who's controlling the money? Who's the control freak in the family, right? What are the trust issues? A lot of people want to know they can trust people if they're going to start to give them some responsibility about money, or they're going to start to transfer assets, or they're going to start having these conversations. So those are what I call above the surface. Also could include that would be, mom's been diagnosed with cancer, right? Maybe there's a family illness that nobody's talking about that's a problem. But then I go deeper. I mean, it could be family history. Everyone has, particularly when you're dealing with a marriage, you're bringing two different money personalities, two different lifestyles potentially, a lot of different money history and different types of personalities around acquiring, using, and managing. So you got to compromise. You got to negotiate those differences, right? It could be gender politics, the way women and men think and act around money.
Yeah.
It's just, I give a whole host. But the important thing is for you to figure out what's keeping your family or you from having this conversation with your family members or loved ones or whoever you need to have these conversations with, because each scenario is very, very different.
Yeah. And just even the relational dynamics in the family. Wow. It's like just trying to be avoidant of like, I don't want to set this person off, or I don't want to, put more on this person than they already have on their plate. Or like, there's all of that too, that just, wow, it really, I'm glad that you have a whole book full of solutions, because that I was thinking as you were talking about these things, I'm like, well, she's like 75% psychologist and probably 25% financial planner.
I'd probably take it up to 90% psychologist. I mean, look, whenever you're dealing with people, you have to listen, you have to think through the personalities. And, money is a really difficult topic to talk about. It's a taboo in many cultures and many families. It's an object of threat and control for many people. So, why it's important to think through, what are the factors that you're dealing with here?
Yeah. Let's go down what could be a rabbit trail, the difference between men and women and how our relationship with money. Can you explain that a little bit so we can maybe, and let me just say this, obviously we know the majority of our audience are women who are really trying to play big. And then we have really smart men who are listening in on the conversation so they can better understand. So with that being your audience, let's talk about it.
Yeah. It's funny. I did a presentation for an advertising group in New York City, and one of the leaders in the organization came up to me afterwards, and I did the whole presentation on gender differences and how they impact money decisions and, different personality outcomes. So it was interesting. He came up to me and he said, "Oh my God, now I get it. I understand why my wife and I totally don't talk, we don't have a common perspective on money. I totally get it now. Thank you so much." So it's typically the men that are more excited about this information. So let's talk about it. There are specific gender differences, and they're physiological, which I find interesting. They impact the way our brains function. And without going into a lot of technical information, because it is pretty technical and physiological, but it's been supported by over 30 studies involving 1 million participants around the world. Okay. So, dozens of studies in 30 countries with 1 million participants around the world. So these differences, which are brain-based, are not, they're not associated with any geography or language. They're universal. So what I try to tell my clients and people who I speak to is you need both brains to make good decisions, and it's not personal the way the interaction takes place. So all these differences. Let me just give you a couple examples. Women have a slightly larger prefrontal cortex, which means we are more strategic in our thinking. We tend to think more long term. Men tend to think more short term. We have a slightly larger corpus callosum, which is that middle part of the brain, which allows us to go back and forth to our left and right brain. That gives us all the benefits of walking into a room and they, notice everything. My husband never notices when I get my hair cut, for God's sakes, right? So, So we have the ability to read situations in ways that men can't, and that can create conflict. But at the end of the day, what does all this mean? We make money decisions differently, right? We have different goals and priorities and different risk tolerance and different ways of investing than men do. And we also have different ways of communicating. We have much stronger connections between, our emotion, our memory sections of our brain and our communication. So we have the ability to talk about things that men may not, and oftentimes it's the woman that says, "I need to have this conversation with you." You may have experienced that, Amber, in your life. So my sense is, these are real differences, and I see them all the time play out in meetings with clients. It's inevitable.
Yeah. Before I got married, I was insistent that we complete the Financial Peace University together. And I'm not saying that's a better program than other programs. I'm just saying it's the one program I'd already been a graduate from that taught me that there's a nerd and there's a free spirit. And I knew who I was as a recovering teen mom. So you will have single mom syndrome for the rest of your life if you've ever had to have everything on you and you are the person. That's a different mindset than somebody who maybe came from a more abundant type family and never really had to worry about things and just didn't ever. So that was a big deal for me. And then also much later, I wanted to hire a financial coach because I'm like, we have all this abundance. Are we maximizing? Are we being wise? Are we thinking legacy? Like, are we using all the different vehicles that we could possibly use? And why are we flying by the seat of our pants? Like, why is there not a plan in place here? So like, so for me, it was like, common language, communication, shared goals. Where are we both driving in the same direction? Like those things were important to me. Can't attest for the other person that I'm no longer married to, but there's a difference there. And I wouldn't just say him, I would say most men.
And your description of your scenario is very, very typical.
Yeah.
Okay. And women tend to really, what I find interesting is women are interested in getting advice and having somebody who'll listen to them and they can learn from. Oftentimes, men come in and they tend to be more transactional. They may not want to put together a game plan as much as their spouse or their partner wants to. So we see those differences play out all the time. I hate to say it, but your situation is pretty typical.
It's pretty, of course. Yeah. There wouldn't be these programs and these resources in place if it wasn't typical. There wouldn't be names like you're the free spirit and you're the nerd if my situation wasn't typical. But I guess I share that just so that as our listeners are ruminating over this, like there is no one who is immune to this. And so you have this book that is going to equip you to then, like, I wish I would have had this book before because, maybe I would have approached things more strategically.
Well, I think part of what I talk about in terms of marriage and remarriage is transparency and openness.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be the primary goal. Yeah. And that can be on a very practical level, assets and liabilities. Are we going to merge or separate assets? How are we going to pay bills? That's a very basic conversation, but then you need to go further. What are your values? What are you trying to accomplish? What's your family history with money? Talk to me about the money personalities in your family. I mean, that's going to help because when you enter into a marriage, you don't know what you don't know about that person, right? I mean, it takes years, I think, to really get to know somebody fully. And so it's better to put a lot of this on the table and talk about it in advance. I find that couples who are more open and transparent about money tend to have a higher probability of success or tend to have a better marriage. So I've seen that in my experience. And so I do think that money is the core of everything we do, right? And we all bring unique money personalities based on a lot of family history. You can actually create a moneygram and show how these personalities have been passed down through generations.
Yes.
A moneygram. So I think those are issues that you're going to see them play out.
Yeah.
But if you can sort of think about it in advance, I think you have a better chance of getting it right.
I love that. Yeah. And even if I just think about like how entrepreneurial I am, and I watched my dad be a musician and travel all around the world to get paid to do something creative. He's a drummer, and I went to private school in Southern California. So like to me, it's possible to make money out of just whatever I create. That's a total normal thing to me. Whereas other people look at me and they go, I can't believe you do that. And I'm like, I can't believe that you are in a seat in a building at 8 o'clock in the morning every day. Like that doesn't, so and that's a money thing. That's how we make our livelihood. Now, a lot led up to this book, Lori. I know that because you are a bombshell. You are a bold, brave, unwaveringly confident woman in business most times, right? We all have our days. So, can you just talk about your journey in a world that's been dominated by men? What was that
Well,
like for you?
and the financial world still is dominated by men. But it's much, much better. So I think, yeah, I have to say it was difficult. It was difficult to enter the financial world as a woman. But I will say the most important qualities I think are tenacity, perseverance, resilience, right? And I stayed true to my values. What I wanted to accomplish in life, the person I wanted to be, the way I wanted to conduct myself, the type of business I wanted to have, and I never deviated. And some people say I'm focused. Well, I think it takes focus, a
Yes.
lot of focus to build a business and to particularly be, to have some success in the financial world as a woman. I think it's not an easy road for women, particularly because of their history with money, and that's a whole nother topic. But I do think that being in the financial services industry is a wonderful place for women. I totally think that we have the ability to listen, communicate in ways that are not always easily accessible to men. We have the ability to look at things in a big way on a long-term time horizon and multiply address a number of topics that the client wants to address. And so I think we're ideally suited for this profession. So if there's any of your individual listeners out there who are interested in this career path, I highly recommend you take a shot at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've done a lot of coaching in the industry and speaking in the industry, and it is there's a very compelling argument that the natural tendencies of the feminine energy is so good for having these more difficult conversations, these more soulful conversations. It's money, but it's not. It's emotion. And so, I've had a client before who said, I have to go up against this, big male personality, and he just buys everybody a steak dinner at a fancy restaurant and then says, give me your money and I'm going to manage it. And then like he completely forgets about his customers. And that's not my approach. And I don't even feel comfortable doing that. And I was like, well, then that's not your brand. That's not how you do it. You're not going to differentiate yourself by copying what he's doing. Like also that's so 1984. So like let's come to today's world and do it your way. So
I think that's great advice.
yeah.
I think in any career path, you want to have a vision and you need to have a game plan and you need to have a business plan and you need to work your plan and, plan to work hard. So,
Plan
yeah.
to work hard. How did you differentiate yourself? Because you weren't just differentiating yourself as a female financial professional is versus all the other females versus everyone in your umbrella company, and then you have your own group that you have. Like, when did you get comfortable saying, this is my lane, these are the type of people that I serve, and this is what makes me unique, you should come work with me and not anybody else?
Yeah, it's called your value proposition and what differentiates you. I come from an interesting background. I was a CPA, I was in banking, I was even in marketing when I got out of business school. So I've done a lot of different things. So I think we all bring all of our experiences, our education, and we frame it and we develop it in a way that's unique to us. And I think that's what I have done. And I think my message around the M word, which I've been working on for over a decade now, was a kind of a missing link out there at the time. I mean, it's getting a lot more attention now, but I think that has made me somewhat of a differentiator in my industry. And so it was, I think, what I'd urge your listeners to do is think about how you can differentiate yourself. Is there an idea? Is there something missing in your profession or in your job or in your workplace that you can, a link that you can connect or a hole that you can fill or something that you can add value to that will make you differentiated in whatever path you take? Yeah.
I love that. And that's something that I encourage bombshells to do. It's actually a whole chapter in the Bombshell Businesswoman, following your breadcrumbs. And that's what I heard you say is like, it's not so much about some tagline or some, whiz bang, flashy jazz hands and fireworky kind of thing that I'm working on over here to differentiate myself. It's here's my history and here's all of my experience. And when you put all that in a blender, it's naturally unique. Like nobody else can repeat my story, and leveraging that. I mean, Lori said it right here, folks. She obviously a very smart woman, confirming that the thing that's special about you is the life you've already lived. That's
I
how you can position yourself uniquely.
and the life that you want to live, looking
Yes.
ahead, carving that path out. So it's worked out for me, but it's not an easy road. So and it takes a lot of time. But I love what you're doing, so I'm thrilled to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, I'm absolutely thrilled to be a part of it. And again, just this is a book worth picking up. Before we go into where to find you and where to find the book and all of that kind of stuff, I do want to ask you my final parting question that I ask every magical guest that we get to enjoy on this show. What parting piece of advice? It doesn't even have to be about money or your story. Just as a fellow bombshell, what parting piece of advice would you give an aspiring or someone who considers himself a bold, brave, unwaveringly confident woman in business?
Wow, that's a great question. So, thinking about that, I think we're all, as working women, we're all pushing ahead, right? We're externally directed. We're trying to make a difference in whatever we're doing, create a life for ourselves, a successful personal business life. And what I have discovered is you need to take time to reflect. You need to take time to think internally about who you are and own your power. Finding your power is within. It's
Mm,
not going to be generated. So my advice would be: it's a crazy world. We're all so busy and we're so socially connected in so many different ways. But take time to to sit back, reflect, journal
mm,
about who you are, what you've done thus far. And oftentimes that will help you figure out what your next step's going to be. And I hear from a lot of the executives we work with, they don't have time to reflect. And I think it's really important that we find the time. So yeah, that's my parting
yeah.
wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing wisdom. And I wasn't planning on to have a follow-up question, but I'm intrigued with what kind of work do you do with executives? What does that look like in your practice?
In my practice, well, so I lead a team of there are a total of 8 of us, and we have 4 partners, we have 4 staff people, but I'm founder and the leader of the group, and it's a great joy for me because I think the other part of the equation is finding the right people to work with, the right chemistry and complementary skill sets. And so our day is very varied. We deal with senior corporate executives and entrepreneurs, and we work a lot with women. So my day is varied and it's fun, but it's taken a lot of time to develop the knowledge that you can actually deliver. So, my other parting advice was get good at what you do. Really take time to figure your skill set out and what you want to do and get really, really good at it. I remember in in 2007 and 8, in 2009, we had the real estate downturn.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett was interviewed on CNBC, and I still remember that interview. And he was asked, what are you telling your investors to do at this moment? Because the world was crazy. And he said, get really good at what you do. Invest in yourself. And I thought, wow, that was just great advice, and I took it. So, I think it's important to do that. So, and then in my practice, we have different people who've done just that, and so it's really fun to hear and combine all those skill sets and deliver to
That's
clients.
awesome. I love that. I don't think in the history of the show I've ever asked a follow-up question like that to the parting piece of advice. So that just shows how much wisdom is just emanating off of you. Well, let's
Okay.
talk about where to find the book. So you can go to the mword.com and learn more
Right.
about it. There's a second edition and the first edition there, and testimonials and all that good jazz. And you can also find it on Amazon. So really truly, if you're breathing, you need this book. And I'm I don't hard sell anybody. I just, from coaching hundreds of people over the years and also my own personal experiences, this is one thing that if you get this part right, a lot of life becomes easier. So I'm a huge advocate
Thank
for
you.
Lori's work. Yeah. Anywhere
Great
else we
endorsement.
can find you? LinkedIn, anywhere else?
You can find me on LinkedIn, yeah. And if you Google me, you can find me, at my office in my work environment. So feel free to reach out, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain them. And I really enjoyed this, Amber. It's been a great exchange. So thank you.
Me as well. I knew I was looking forward to this and you exceeded expectations. So I
Oh,
appreciate
thank
this. Well, bombshell, you know what we do at this stage. We think about who needs to listen to this episode. And you can go to amberhurdle.com/podcasts with an S at the end and look for Lori's episode. All the show notes will be in there, including the different ways that you can purchase the book or find Lori online. And then it's also a great opportunity to just click that URL, copy, paste it into an email or a text message and say, hey, I was listening to this. I know you're going through a transition or you're thinking about going through a transition, or give it to a young person in your life. This is a gift to any young person who can get their money mindset and their ability to talk about money and their attitude about money firm while they're young. So they don't have to learn all the hard lessons that we learned, and we don't have to go through all the pain like we've had to go through. So send this episode specifically, connect with Lori, and I will see you on the next episode.